And for myself, I still have two coaches. I'm reading books every day. I'm still trying to figure it out. And for everybody listening, where you want to go in your life comes down to, you nailed it, the choices you make every day. And if you're not where you want to be, it's probably because, as tough as it is to hear, you need to evaluate your daily choices that you make in all areas of your life.
This week's guest on the Take Two podcast is somebody that I am particularly excited about. He is one of the most powerful performance coaches I think I've ever met in my entire life. And he's also become a really dear friend of mine and someone that I have tremendous regard for. You may have seen him running up and down the sidelines of one of your favorite NFL, NBA, or NCAA teams as, guess what? He has served as the mental performance coach for today's greatest professional athletes and highest performing teams. He's worked with coaches and players from the last 6 Super Bowl championship teams. He currently serves as the performance coach for Michigan State football and basketball programs, as well as the Big 12 champion Kansas State football team. And he served 5 years as the mental conditioning coach for the 18-time national champion football team, Alabama Crimson Tide. He's taken his ability to coach high-performing teams to the boardroom, and he spent the last 20 years coaching the top 1% of financial advisors globally, as well as Fortune 500 business executives from around the world. He's an entrepreneur, he's an investor, #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller, he's a philanthropist, top speaker in the world, and the nation's top continual peak performance coach. Welcoming today's guest, Ben Newman. I've had the honor and privilege to work with Ben, and there are very few people out there that I believe are the example in everything they do. And Ben sets that standard. And today we are going to talk about everything from finding that burn that ignites you to locking in with aggressive patience in order to attack the process and produce the results you desire day after day. This episode is vulnerable. There's even some tears shed. And he shares behind the scenes details of his work coaching some of the top professional sports teams, and also gives you practical ways for you to build your day in order to achieve peak performance in your own life. Let's take two.
Thank you both for the opportunity to spend time with you, with all your listeners, and I couldn't be more excited to be with you.
Thank you, Ben. I think one of the things we really want to look at today, and I know our audience does too, is uncommon leadership. I mean, you know this better than anybody else. You've obviously worked with championship teams, Super Bowl winners, and in this, high impact, high delivery, high stakes, high consequence events and moments that you're regularly working inside of with teams and individuals, whether it be on the field or in the court or in the boardroom. How are you preparing people for those moments? Championship games in the NCAA are no joke. Neither is the Super Bowl. What are those things that you're coaching them on, whether it be individually or as a team?
I think for all of us, if each and every single one of us listening were to think about the period of time when you would say, that's when I was at my level of peak performance, high performance, I was locked in. There was a level of intentional focus that you had to the details, the behaviors, the disciplines that caused you to have success. The tough part is locking in and maintaining that mindset over long periods of time. What's easy is to have success, get seduced by success, and then say, I'm going to take a little time off because we just won. And I deal with that in the boardroom as well as on athletic fields. And it's the same. We're all individuals. So once again, business or sports, individuals all deal with this potential to be seduced by success. And I always pull people back to that standard or that intentional focus one day at a time to have that continued commitment to maintaining success.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think one of the things that we were talking about just as we were getting ready to have this conversation with you is once you have that success, there's always going to be this fallback or this come down moment. I know we heard a quote from Lewis Hamilton, Formula One, Mercedes, Benz driver. Incredible, right? If you look at the trajectory of his career, you look at world superpowers, for instance, Super Bowl champions, you could really list a whole slew of individuals that fall in this, but there is this point where those high performing outcomes become less and less achievable, right? It's how do you sustain that? And I'd love to get your feedback on once you've sustained it, if you just get hijacked in that moment, what does that comeback look like? How do you deal with that comeback? And are there early signs to identifying when the comeback is about to happen?
Well, I think one of the keys is to maintain, staying away from the ebbs and flows. I have success, I pull back, maybe I lose a little bit of my discipline. Am I living in the past success or anticipating success and not just maintaining those disciplines? I call it the connection to your burn. And I know that you enjoy listening to the Burn podcast, which we're in our 5th season already. It's amazing how time flies. But a lot of coaches and speakers that do the work that I do, they talk about why and purpose, which is so significant. But I believe they forget to talk about this underlying burn. And this burn ignites your why and purpose that then causes you to be disciplined over long periods of time, and especially on the days when you don't want to do it. And that burn shows up in many different ways. Sometimes it's somebody that you're currently sacrificing for, right? Your children, your 2 little children, those little eyes watching you, and you're like, they're watching how I show up. We have to be an example because what we do is going to teach them how to live. Or maybe there's somebody who's sacrificed for you and you say, I'm not going to waste the sacrifice that my parents made. Or maybe there's challenge and adversity like I've been through on my journey. So many of us go through challenge and adversity where it gives you perspective that I can't waste these days. My mother passed 11 days before my 8th birthday. We had 24-hour nursing care in the house my mother's last year living. Yet she would come to the dinner table every night to ask me how my day was at school. So if you tell me you're interested in having me come and speak, but then the budget's there or you don't think I'm a good fit, like you can't break me. I'm just going to keep moving. Like the no's are nothing compared to that perspective. So that's given me a burn in my life. And I think we all have that burn, that sacrifice, that perspective that when you connect to that to begin your days, you remain more disciplined and consistent so that you remove those ebbs and flows from your journey.
Yeah, no, I love that, Ben. And I think, as you say, a lot of people, need to tap into that burn. And I've heard you talk about that, and I've heard other people talk about it. And a lot of times it seems that it comes from some adversity, some difficult thing that you had to deal with as a person. I just wonder, is there a way to understand the burn or get you to feel the burn without adversity? Because, it's so much easier in the world if we don't have to get people to go through adversity for them to understand their burn.
Yeah, if I could actually provide 2 examples, we'll give it to both sides. One of my favorite examples in the business world, because people see all my work in sports and these rings and championships, and people mention in the bio, I probably do more work in a corporate setting than I actually do in the world of athletics. So I'm going to give you a great corporate story. But one of the things I love, so sometimes that person who says, well, I don't know what my burn is. I'm challenged to find my vision. I love asking people this question. Grab your future and bring it to today. What do you see for your future? People aren't going to see nothing for their future. So it gets people to engage in a conversation. And then you may have that person who's single right now. One day I want to have a family. One day I want to have kids. One day I want to do these things, and just get them talking. And then once they engage, you say, okay, when you have a family, do you want to be present? Do you want to go to practices? Do you want to go to plays? Do you want to be engaged in what do you want that to look like as a parent? And then they start to engage and they express, here's what I want. And then you pull it back, right? You got to grab that future, bring it to today, put it right in front of your face. What do you need to do today to drive that? And then that becomes, oh, I got it. I need to work today, one day at a time, if I want that freedom to be able to do the things I want with my family when it comes. So you try to take people to that future. You help them grab that vision. We all know, right? We deal with enough leaders to know that most times when you're leading people who are maybe just getting that start, or people who are lost after success, I don't know what my vision is. That's the easy answer. But we as leaders have to pull them back to that future and vision, allow them to see it, and then act on it. My favorite story from the corporate world, one of my favorites, is a young man named Claudio Gambin. He and I started doing work together about 8 years ago in the coaching space. And I love this because it embodies so many of the beliefs that I have. And when we started working together, he was one of the top financial advisors in the world, probably in the top 1%. He was doing about $600,000 to $700,000 of sales in the financial world. Fast forward to today, He now in his mid-30s does around $13 million of revenue. He's probably in the 0.0001% of all the financial advisors walking the face of the earth. We could have made the argument all those years ago, like if you just keep doing what you're doing, you'll provide an amazing life and have a huge legacy. But he always believed in maximizing every day. And even where he is today, he sees no end in sight. And here's why. Every day he wakes up and he connects to the sacrifice that his parents made when they left high-paying jobs in Brazil so that he and his sister, first-generation immigrants to the United States, would have better lives and opportunity than they had in Brazil. And they came to Orlando, Florida, and they had nothing. They had little money. They each had to get 2 jobs to make ends meet to provide that future. And every day Claudio wakes up and he says, I will not waste a day. And I asked him one time, I said, Claudio, what makes you great? It was one of my favorite answers. He says, you know, it doesn't matter what I did yesterday. It doesn't matter what I think I'll do tomorrow. If I don't do what I said I was going to do today, the amount of guilt that I live with is too much for me to handle. I'd rather just do the work. And so to me, that's what happens when you connect to your burn and you connect to that circumstance, is you just keep writing the story and fighting to make that impact.
Oh, I love that. You know, the thing that I connect with and what I heard you say, and it's something I deeply believe as well, is that, you know, that burn, that passion is a way of being. It's not just what you do, it's a way of being. And the wonderful thing for me about a way of being is that, so one thing I'm absolutely passionate about is being creative and being supportive. And, you know, I can do that in the most boring business meeting in the world. I can be creative and I get that energy back into myself and I just move forward with pace. So yeah, I love it. It's such a good analogy.
See, and I love hearing that, because that's what it takes. It has to, in the moment that you stay connected to that burn and you drive that intentionality to the burn. Even if you walk into that room, like you said, where it doesn't exist, you be the igniter that makes it exist in that room.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sometimes it makes people so uncomfortable because, you know, people do not like passion in a room. I don't know if you've experienced that. There's a great Pink Floyd song, you know, that Comfortably Numb. Pink Floyd had some of the most amazing lyrics in the world, you know, and comfortably numb. A lot of people want to live in a world of comfortably numb. You know, just do not make waves. Just let us get through this day so I can get home and just be comfortably numb again. And I think that's what, you know, you've got to push through that, and you've got to be that passionate person that steps into a room and brings energy.
Yeah. And Ben, one thing, you know, it's so funny because when I met Rickus, I was kind of comfortably numb, and he actually posed a question to me of, you know, where am I my most passionate and my most creative? And it ignited that fire in me. Right. But I would love to get your sense of when people they don't know where that burn is, or they can't find the source of it, or they're just really struggling with taking the coaching from you. How do you deal with somebody that is not coachable? Right. I mean, in my experience, when you're coaching somebody, you have to take the coaching on the other side. And I'm sure we've all had experiences if somebody says, hey, you're full of shit, I don't believe what you're saying. What do you do? How do you deal with people who are not coachable?
Well, one of the things that I always lean on is some amazing research that I did years ago. I've been doing this for 16 years. And, you know, it's one thing. I just want to make a recommendation. I believe everybody, just like great teams, there should be a coach, accountability, a mentor, and you don't have to pay for it, but don't try to go at this alone in life. But you also have to be careful because everybody's a coach and a speaker these days. But I've been doing this a long time, and I know that you've surrounded yourself with leaders and greats in the world that have been doing this a long, long time. And oftentimes you'll find that people doing this at a high level, they've done a lot of research. And one of my favorite pieces of research is from Max Weber, spelled Weber, W-E-B-E-R, and he was one of the fathers of sociology. And he talked about the difference of power versus authority. Power is when you force or coerce somebody to do your will. Authority is when you empower or inspire somebody to choose what you know they should choose in order to drive that success. And so one of the things I derived from all this research that I did over a decade ago was a philosophy called questions over statements. My naturalness, believe it or not, as a leader is to yell and scream and go do this. But I learned pretty quickly people aren't very receptive to that. So they get my big heart, the big teddy bear side of me rather than the screaming and yelling. Although when that vein pops out of my neck, I always tell people I'm not yelling. That's my passion. But I like to ask questions rather than making a statement. Rakis, you go do this. Even if I know, I would rather say, Rakis, what's your biggest goal for the year? Just engage in a conversation. Well, I don't really have any goals. If there was one thing you could do with your beautiful family this year, if there was one place that you could go, what would that one thing be? And then they may say, gosh, I would love to go to Disney World and have a trip where all we do is say yes. I don't say no the entire trip. Well, even though that short-term burn, now that might be expensive, so you're gonna have to work hard. You're gonna have no no's at Disney World. But what ends up happening is now you've given them something to get excited about, to talk about. Rakis, as you mentioned, that you brought life to the conversation. You brought that burn. You brought that energy. And look, my burn, you may say, well, Ben, that's a far cry from a mom who passes away at 7 years old, and that ignites you every day. I get it. But the question was, how do you get to that person who's fighting it? So sometimes we have to start on a smaller scale, get them to talk about something they love. And if they could embrace that short-term goal of Disney World this year and pull that back to daily behaviors that cause them to see their kids' eyes every day, stuffed animals, cotton candy, rides, saying yes to all these things, that teaches people to engage in that burn. And so sometimes it can be that short term. I prefer it to not be materialistic, but if somebody's fighting you and we have to start there, I love asking those questions, getting them to engage so they can have a clearer vision of what that short-term success looks like to create long-term behaviors.
Yeah, I love this piece too around choice that you mentioned. I think so often we feel like we need to make a decision. And it's like you look at the word decide, and side is the root word to kill off. So like suicide, homicide, decide. There's so much lack of power in that. But when you use the word choice, it's like, I'm choosing this. There's so much power in that. Now, I won't choose Disney because if I give my kids a yes day, then it's going to be the end of all beginning.
Well, it's interesting you use that word choice. So the greatest life lesson I've ever learned, it actually did come from my mom. And my mom taught me, and she had this journal. So if you can picture this, my mom goes to Boston. She's told she's only the second woman under 40 years old they'd ever seen or heard of having the disease amyloidosis. Dr. Skinner at the Boston Medical Center gives my mother 2 to 4 years to live. And my mother chooses to take out an old blue Mead notebook, maybe like you used to have in school. Maybe yours was another color. And she decided to unleash her positive mental attitude onto the world. She wrote, beat the statistics, beat the odds, live with the disease that is chronic and fatal, believe in yourself, combat anything, purpose in life. Writing those words as a single mom, fighting to make ends meet. My parents were divorced when I was 6 months old. And here my mother's told she has 2 to 4 years to live. And that is what she writes. And the greatest life lesson that I got from that journal and watching her come to that dinner table with an IV stand to ask me how my day was at school, it's not how long you live, it's how you choose to live your life. And for myself, I still have 2 coaches. I'm reading books every day. I'm still trying to figure it out. And for everybody listening, where you want to go in your life comes down to, you nailed it, the choices you make every day. And if you're not where you want to be, it's probably because, as tough as it is to hear, you need to evaluate your daily choices that you make in all areas of your life.
Yeah. But you also wrote a really, really interesting book, Uncommon Leaders. And we identified the 3 things you saw in common through all those leaders, and so the one was, that all lead by example. And then they also recognize that great teams are a group of great individuals. I'm really interested in, was there anything else that you identified there that you saw with all those 11 people that you wrote about?
So a couple of them that stand out from 2 amazing leaders that I've had the blessing of working with over a long period of time. I've worked in collegiate football for over 10 years, and I've had the opportunity to win 5 national championships. Now, I never put on the pads. You never saw me on the field, but it's been a blessing to wave at the flames of these young men's fire. But 3 national championships at North Dakota State, 2 at Alabama. And then now the head coach at North Dakota State took me with him to Kansas State. His name is Coach Chris Kleiman. And then at Alabama, Coach Nick Saban. Those 2 coaches over the last 15 years are the 2 winningest coaches in college football over the last 15 years. No two men have won more football games. So I've been able to see it firsthand. What does it take to win? And the two powerful lessons that I share in the book from them, number one, from Coach Saban, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And leaders have a tendency to understand that your discipline in one area shows up in all areas. And the 11 leaders that we highlight in that book, and I could have written about more, were 11 leaders that have impacted my life. I told you guys, I'm not finished yet. I'm still trying to find the best way to compete and the best way to win. But those 11 leaders, they all have great discipline in all areas of their life. So the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And then the second overarching theme comes from what I learned from Coach Kleiman. Find your edge in the details. The most successful people, the uncommon leaders, have a tendency to not just accept what's on the surface, but they're going to go down and say, if we had success, how did we have success? And what are the finite details? Back to those choices again. What are the choices we can make every day as a team so that we're not seduced by success and we continue to chase what our best looks like?
Yeah, one thing, Ben, that I had actually read in the book too is you make reference to belief, right? You talk about belief, and I've seen firsthand when somebody believes in me, it's like there's this whole new person that emerges. And I've also seen when I give somebody belief, especially the work that we do in the townships here in South Africa, they don't really have a future most of the time. And when you can show somebody that you believe in them, you believe in what they're creating, this new future emerges, right? And you get a totally different person in front of you. I would love your take on, is belief the same as trust? Are they different things? Are both required?
I think belief and trust are different. I'll tell you what, it's kind of ironic. This just happens to be in front of me because it was part of a virtual talk that I gave. So I'm going to share something pretty amazing. I didn't intend on sharing, didn't know this was, one of the things we were going to discuss. But I want to take everybody to Coach Kleiman's office. So that's now the head coach at Kansas State when we were at North Dakota State. You can picture this as 5 years ago. It's our final year, our fourth year. I just started my 9th season with Coach Kleiman. So, when you build a cadence with great leaders, you can continue to have long-term relationships and impact. So that fourth year at North Dakota State, I walk into his office. We were preparing to go down to Frisco, Texas to win another national championship. He had already accepted the job at Kansas State to be the new head coach. But he told the athletic director there, Mr. Taylor, he said, I will not take this job unless you allow me to finish my job with the players at North Dakota State where we started this mission with them, which I just admired his loyalty to the team. I won't take that job. And so I walk into his office and he says, I know we have to prepare for this national championship. We're getting ready to board a plane to go down to Frisco, but we have to talk about the messaging that we're going to take to Kansas State. Because once we win this national championship, in 3 weeks, we're at Kansas State. And he went on to share with me. He said, here's what the media is telling me about this job. Here is what other people are telling me about this job. He says, who in the world would take the job at Kansas State? Right now, the program is struggling. You can't recruit people to Manhattan, Kansas, this tiny little town. The roster is not what it once was. And you're following a Hall of Fame coach, and the stadium in Manhattan, Kansas is named after him. Who would take this job? So that's what he's sharing with me. And so sometimes in the world that we live in, there's fears, there's doubts, there's uncertainties, there's these voices of negativity, or there's media or politics that tell us that we have to think a certain way. We have to choose to believe and think, and then the trust comes in having the right people around you. We get to choose our beliefs. So we could have gone to Kansas State and said, how could we ever win here? But you know what? It's Big 12 football. This will be exciting. We're going to play these great teams. But instead, when we walked out of his office, he and I both trusted in each other and the process that we believed in. We believed in trust in that process, but then we believed in some amazing goals. I left his office and I made this bookmark. This bookmark I made before I ever went to Kansas State, before I ever gave a speech there, before I ever met a player. I'd never been to that campus. All I knew was what he had told me in his office that day. We go on to win that national championship. I go home. I make this very bookmark. This bookmark I look at every single day. I've looked at it every day for almost 5 years. And on the back of this bookmark is a list of goals that I wrote that I believed in, that I wanted to instill that belief in others so that they could trust. And I trusting in the process is not enough. I say trust and then attack the process one day at a time. I'm just going to share 3 of the goals, but it's just blowing me away that you just asked me this question. This was literally right in front of me. And so one of the goals was in 2019, our first year there, that we would go 8-5 and go to a bowl game. Would you believe that our first year there, we went 8-5 and went to a bowl game? Nobody could believe it. They had a losing record the season before. People said you can't recruit and you can't win football games. I wrote down the exact record. Second goal, I wrote down to get Coach Kleiman to his second contract. I'm a big believer in selfless goals. This man has meant so much to me that I said, I'm going to work in such a way. He's getting an extension on his contract. He's getting a set. He's going to cause all these people who said we couldn't do it to believe in him. These players are going to trust in him, and he's going to get that second contract. Not only since we got on campus has he gotten his second contract, the last 2 years, because all of the winning we've done, has given him an automatic extra year on the back end of his contract. And then the third goal that I want to share with you, and this is the one where people, this is just crazy to even think about. I wrote down that we would win a Big 12 championship in 2021. This past season, 4 years after getting to campus, the stadium named after the coach, you cannot win there. You cannot recruit there. This team almost finished number 10 in the entire country, and we won the Big 12 championship. Now, many people say, well, Ben, that was 2022, and I just blame it on COVID. We were a year late. But it's amazing to think that on here 4 years ago, never met a player, I believed, Coach Kleiman believed, and then we instilled that belief in those young men. And then here's the beauty of this, they trusted, and they have taken ownership in that program. It's gotten to the point you can walk in. It's like, we don't even need to say anything anymore. It's like with these kids, it's like, you guys can coach yourselves. We're just here to love on you, support you, and let you know that we've got your back. And that's the beauty of what I call aggressive patience. You have to believe in it. You have to trust in it. Those things are different. And then you have to attack it every single day with aggressive patience. Nobody ever would have believed that these young men would have won this Big 12 championship, but those men believed it, and so did we.
Oh, that is so good. I love it so much. It's so our debate's always about trust, and I think we are on the same storyline there. Because for me, trust is a gift. It's a gift that you give, and I can see as you spoke, I can actually see those players gifting their trust to the coach and to the process, and say, we're going to make this work. Because so many people think of trust as something you have to earn over time, but until that point that you earn the trust, you don't trust. So, and you don't feel trusted, and you don't give your trust to, and I so agree with that. That level of trust giving is what makes the difference between mediocre performance and absolutely top quality performance.
Yeah. And Ben, I have to say, I love so much that you wrote down your goals. I mean, I'm a big believer that you speak things and write things into existence, but also what I saw was what you shared about your mom when she was at Boston Medical, and she was writing down everything positive and the energy that she needed to create for herself in those final years. And so it was so beautiful to see that you've carried this notion of writing, but you're putting it into the goals that you're creating. So I loved that. Just wanted to acknowledge it because it brought me back to what you just shared a moment ago.
Well, I thank you so much for mentioning that. And, the safe in our house is right over here. And there's 2 things in that safe that belong to me. One is my mother's will, and the other is that journal. And, when I hold that journal, and I encourage everybody to find this for themselves, sometimes we hold back from connecting to what's so powerful. And when I first got that journal from my grandma, I was too weak. I couldn't read it. I emotionally couldn't handle it. I mean, I cry when I watch Extreme Home Makeovers. So if you can imagine, I get this journal and I'm bawling like a baby. I mean, I tucked it in a box for years. I mean, for over 10 years, it's just traveled with me in a box. But then now I've realized this journal, my mother's tears are on the pages in that journal. My mother's hands have touched that journal. My mother's handwriting is in that journal. How could I not connect to that? And so I encourage everybody it happens at different times. For me, I saw it, I touched it, I lived it, I was emotional, I put it in a box, I didn't want any part of it. And then when my wife was pregnant with our first child, Isaac, that's when I ripped that box back open and I was able to dive into the power of that journal. So I think for all of us, as painful as it might be, when the timing is right, I think you got to let it go. You got to rip into your proverbial box, and you have to recognize the strength that often comes from our pain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I also think that there's so much that you can take from that story, right? It's you reopen those pages. It's like you block off so much of your past when you're going through pain that it represents what was there. And I think especially as we mature and we get older and we're in a space of completeness to deal with it, you really can deal with it in a way that, it shows you something and it teaches you something. And we also believe in the power of journaling. If you were to see our library, I've got like 12 journals. So I love so much because I feel this immediate connection to what you share, and definitely encourage people to take on just putting their thoughts on paper. I think it creates a mental bit of space that you might not be able to get otherwise if it sits there.
Here's my journal now. It's like in honor of my mom. So my dear friend, Andy Frisella, started a program called 75 Hard, which has been huge for me. It's a program that really challenges your mental capacity. And so here I am, I'm a coach, I'm already working every day. And I used to fight this program. And finally I said, why would I not do something that's impacting all these people? But I share this with you because inside of this, there's just so much. If you can see, there's visuals for me, there's all kinds of stuff that's written down, there's goals, there's daily readings, the number of stuff. And so I think there's a level of intentionality when something is meaningful enough for you. And I don't know if you've experienced this with your journals, but this becomes part of my daily environment. And I think a lot of times people haven't set their environment up to connect to that burn or what lies inside of them. So one of the things I do every day, I have what I call my burn journal. So even though I know what the burn is, I write it down every single day. So if you go page after page after page, you can keep looking back in this. It's just page after page. Every day I'm writing the exact same thing, but that's one of the things that I do in the morning, because I think some people, if we can take them to understand their burn, that's not enough. If they don't connect to it on a daily basis, not once a week, on a daily basis, they'll never understand the power of it. And so I don't know about for you, but journaling really helps me connect to that environment and consistency of that burn to ignite my behavior every day.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think one of the things that, for me, when I heard some of your podcasts, you talk about how early you get up in the mornings and how you set yourself up for the day. And I think one thing that really stood out for me was how you create extra work days for yourself in a year. That is just mind blowing. And the other one is that by 6 o'clock in the morning, you've done 90% of the work that you need to do, because, as you say, and I totally agree with that, is to be present to someone, you can't have other stuff in your space. You need to know that that's been handled and you've got the time to do that and time to be with someone.
Well, I think to that point, it all becomes a math problem, right? So I love the math problem. And I used to be the guy who, didn't wake up early, and he would hit the snooze button and show up to work when I was a financial advisor and look in the rearview mirror like, oh my God, totally distracted. And then finally I said, I've got to stop doing this. And so it started with grabbing 30 minutes of time. And what a lot of people don't realize is an extra 30 minutes a day times 5 days in a week is 2.5 hours, times 4 weeks in a month is 10 hours. That's an extra work day. So you extrapolate that for an entire year, you get an extra 12 days of work by waking up 30 minutes earlier. Who wouldn't want an extra almost month of work days? And that's what 30 minutes can give you. And so that's one of the things that I realized was the importance of taking your time back, which then gave me the ability to be present and focused with my family once we started having kids. And I'm going to be direct because I care that much. So if the vein pops out, remember, it's passion. I'm not yelling at
It's
anybody.
bonding, Ben. I can see it.
But I get really frustrated with these coaches and individuals that do what I do, and they teach that balance doesn't exist. They teach that you work really hard and then go take vacations. No, you wake up a little earlier, you make a little bit of sacrifice, you do things the right way, and now I can complete my morning routine by 6 a.m. because I travel a lot away from the family for sports and business. And now I can wake my kids up. I can take my kids to school. I can make my kids breakfast. I can be done when I want to be done and go to their practices and go to their games and still accomplish performing at a very, very high level. And I don't say that to impress anybody, but a very high level. But that all starts with routine and sacrifice and discipline. Please do not listen to those people who say balance doesn't exist. That's typically a cop out because they lack discipline to do the things they actually want to do in their lives. I think, designing your life and designing, I know how much, the two of you love and appreciate travel. We intentionally build our calendar to have travel. We intentionally now spend the entire month of July in California. So if there's any companies that want me to come speak in California in July, I'm sorry, I'm not going to speak for your company in July because that's my month with the family. I'll do it virtual, but I don't travel. So we built an environment because I know once I get to August, I'm on a sideline with a football team every weekend the rest of the year. Now I get home on Saturdays after the game, so I still have my Sundays, but I'm missing every Saturday. So I want to make up for it somewhere. And so you can build your calendar to travel, to have fun, to be intentional. If you don't, I just believe you're going to have regret that you didn't spend time that you wanted to with your family. And I'm just one of those believers. If you design it and you're intentional, all the way back to how we started, intentional focus in the areas that matter most, you can have success in all areas of your life.
I've heard you make reference, Ben, to having personal fulfillment, professional fulfillment, and then being in service to others. When you're designing your day, creating your environment, how are you dividing this up? What are those things that you're doing in those three spaces? Because I think people do struggle with that balance, right? And so what is it that you're doing that you can share with the audience that they can have as a hardcore takeaway of, okay, let me look at how I'm designing my life and how is it that not only am I going to be high performing professionally in my personal life, but also in the things that I'm doing in the impact space, in service to others, and to really making the world a better place.
What you're referencing is what we call a prize fighter day. Now, I don't care what you call it. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but I believe life is a fight. My mother's the greatest prize fighter I've ever known. And life now is really like it's a sprint, it's a marathon, it's a boxing match all wrapped up into one. But I call it a prize fighter day that breaks down your personal choices you make every day, your professional choices or athletic choices, and your service to others. And so I'm actually going to share, it'll be a link that you can share for a free course on how people can actually build their prize fighter day. And then we'll also give everybody access to a free copy of your mental toughness playbook. So here's my problem. I give away all this stuff for free when I should be selling it. But when you go through this course, it'll give you the ability to choose. If you know, like you mentioned that working out is so important. Why? Because you get that vitamin D, you get that sun, it releases your endorphins, you feel good, you sweat, that positive energy. Well, if that's what you get from working out, it's easy. One of your personal choices every day is working out. Because why wouldn't you want that feeling? Or people who say, gosh, when I eat nutritious foods, I feel better, my energy's better. Well, then maybe you should eat nutritious foods. I mean, these are simple ways you can design your day. You know what? I've had a lack of focus with my family. Years ago, I struggled with this. And, you're married to your phone, you're married to this. And sometimes I'm still not the best with it. I try. But one of the things I did, I admitted that to one of my coaches. And he said, you need to create present time. When you get home, I don't care if it's 30 minutes or an hour, put the phone away. So I've had people who put into their prize fighter day, the first hour of when I get home, put the phone away. Nobody needs you that bad. Unless you're a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon and there might be an emergency surgery, most of us, 99%, you put your phone away for an hour. So there's different things we can do. And then professionally, I could say to everybody listening, what's the single most important habit or discipline that when you do it every day, you're going to create wins in your business? We all know what those things are. And I actually believe that winning is not rings and money. Winning is your ability to look yourself in the mirror one day at a time and say, today I gave it my very best. And if you can do that and stack those days, the byproduct is winning at very high levels. So when I ask you, what's the single most important daily discipline for you to be, we all know. You can say, okay, when I do this, when I send this number of emails, when I manage and organize our pipeline, okay, you do those things every day. They're a choice. They drive success. It's not a result. It's the behaviors and disciplines that cause the result. Then I love asking people the question. It's important. You guys can tell I love talking about this. I love asking the question. Okay, you all just wrote down the single most important daily discipline. Over the last 30 days, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10?
Hmm.
And that's where we really find out how bad we want it. Because everybody knows what they need to do. They can tell you what they want to do, but the consistency in our action writes the real story. So I encourage you to build that prize fighter day, identify what it is, and stop trying to control the results and just do it one day at a time. And then the last piece is, I really take it from John Wooden, who's one of the greatest coaches to ever coach anything. He was the basketball coach for UCLA, 10 championships in 12 years. And this is fascinating. He wrote more best-selling books in his 90s than 99% of best-selling authors.
Wow.
And he used to say, you cannot have a great day until you've done something for somebody else with no expectation of anything in return.
Mm.
And I think for us to give of ourselves every day, to do something to spread love, to do something to spread goodness or energy to the world, it's the least we can do. So what can you do personally? What can you do professionally? What can you do of service? That's what you call prize fighter days. You stack those days, you win at very high levels.
Oh, that's great, Ben. Well, we're definitely going to put that into the notes and we'll have it located in the comments as well. But before we wrap this up, though, I think we have a couple of just some rapid fire questions that showed up for me that I wrote down throughout. And Rickus wrote one down too. So if you're good, I'd like to just shoot a couple questions at you just to close this down.
Please.
Okay, so you talk a lot about habits, setting up your environment, designing your day, daily routines, right? And I mean, like I said, I heard the time that you wake up and I wish that I could commit to that, but I'm telling you it's a pipe dream for me right now. If I have
I
to
don't
get
recommend that to anybody, by the way. So,
but I would love for everybody to hear from you. What is that one routine or one habit that you don't have, but would love to have?
one routine or habit. So I would say, so when I'm doing 75 hard, you guys are going to get into my mind here. When I'm doing 75 hard, there's no compromise, right? So there's no cheat meals. There's no alcohol. Like if you had a bite of cheesecake, you're back to day zero. When I'm not on 75 hard, I really like that bite of cheesecake. And if there's cookies, now I don't cheat often, but when I cheat, I will cheat. So like if there's a box of cookies and it's a Saturday and that's a cheat day, I'm not eating one cookie, I'm eating 4. So I have to get better at learning to control my sweet tooth, because what happens is, and I do the full 75 hard program, and then I do phases of 30 of it. So I could go into great detail on that. But when I'm not on the program, I'm still probably 95% of what I need to do. But that 5% sometimes gets a little silly with the sugar that I like to put into my mouth. There's your honest answer. You probably didn't expect that one.
No, I love it. It's like Ben Newman in the law.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And from my side, the one rapid fire question, we all have this every morning. You wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror and it's just you and yourself, and you look at yourself. What do you see?
So what I see is the opportunity to be the example. And that's the way that it's always been. And for me, I can't waste the days, knowing that my mom came to the dinner table with an IV stand, and I know this is emotional to wrap things up, but my mother passed away at 38 years old. I'm 44. So every day past my age of 38, one day at a time, has been a gift that my mother never had. So when I look in the mirror, I tell myself, you better go get this thing today. And, that's part of that burn and that fire. And, nobody's going to show up and think of my mom and my story and go do it. But that's why I encourage everybody, spend some time on the burn.
You're not just a great leader and a real leader, but you also make impact. And you show that by giving these things for the audience to really, really get what it is to get that burn and share who you are. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Ben. I appreciate it.
And sharing that I'm a human being that eats cheesecake and chocolate chip cookies too much.
And love sugar sometimes.
Yeah, we laugh because I know someone who likes that as well.
My kids call me Chippy. They call me Chippy because I get lost in a bag of chips if I go down that route. So, well, thank you, Ben. We really, really appreciate your time and your energy for the value that you added today.